Listen, everybody wants the result. Nobody wants the start. The start is messy, uncomfortable, and filled with judgment from people who aren't doing a damn thing themselves. But if you actually care about building something real, your dream, your business, your life, you've got to stop overthinking and begin. Starting isn't about perfection, it's about momentum. And today is the day you stop talking and finally move. Most people don't struggle because they lack talent, resources, or opportunities. They struggle because they are stuck in their own heads. Overthinking is the silent killer of dreams. It convinces you that you need more information, more preparation, more time, or more certainty before you move. But the truth is, you don't need any of that to begin. The gap between you and the life you want isn't a lack of ability. It's the fact that you haven't taken the first swing. Overthinking disguises itself as being responsible or strategic, but really it's fear wearing a suit. It's fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of starting small. And while you're busy debating with yourself, someone less talented, less knowledgeable, and less prepared is passing you simply because they started. When you start executing instead of thinking, the entire game changes. Action gives you data. It gives you feedback. It gives you momentum. You learn more from 1 hour of doing than from 10 hours of thinking. People don't realize that clarity doesn't come before action. It comes from action. You're waiting to feel ready, but readiness is a myth. Nobody ever feels ready to start a business, switch careers, post their first video, or take a risk that exposes them. You create readiness by stepping into the arena, not by standing outside imagining how the fight might go. Overthinking also traps you in the illusion of the perfect plan. You tell yourself you need to know every step, predict every obstacle, and guarantee the outcome. But that's not how real life works. The market doesn't care about your plan. Your customers don't care about your plan. Life doesn't follow your plan. Execution allows you to adapt, adjust, and build as you go. Perfection is just procrastination disguised as quality control. The people winning are the ones willing to put something out that's good enough. And then improve it based on reality, not imagination. Another brutal truth, overthinking is often rooted in caring too much about other people's opinions. You think people are watching you, judging every move, waiting for you to fail, but nobody is paying that much attention. Everyone is too busy worrying about themselves. When you realize that, you free yourself to operate with speed instead of hesitation. You stop delaying your life because of imaginary critics who don't even remember what they had for breakfast yesterday. Starting is uncomfortable, yes, but the longer you wait, the heavier the start becomes. The idea grows bigger in your mind, the fear grows stronger, and the regret starts to creep in. The only way to break that cycle is to take one small action, not a grand gesture, not a perfect launch, one step. Send the email, record the video, share the post, make the call, build the prototype. Small actions compound, and once you take the first step, the second step becomes obvious. You can think for the next 10 years and still be in the same place, or you can execute today and move an inch forward. An inch of progress beats a decade of thought. Most people delay their dreams because they're waiting for the perfect setup, more money, better tools, the right connections, a bigger audience, or some magical moment when everything lines up. But that moment doesn't exist. If you can't start with what's in front of you right now, you're not going to start when you have more. Using what you have isn't a compromise. It's the foundation of every real success story. The biggest companies, creators, and entrepreneurs you admire didn't begin with ideal circumstances. They began with whatever resources, skills, and access they had at the time. What separates them from the people still waiting is that they understood momentum matters more than equipment, and progress matters more than perfection. There's a dangerous illusion that having more will make the journey easier. You think better gear will make your videos better. More money will make your business safer. More support will make your confidence stronger. But if you haven't developed the ability to work with limited resources, you won't magically become disciplined or creative when you have more. Scarcity forces innovation. It makes you resourceful. It teaches you how to stretch every minute, every dollar, every tool. When you learn to produce value with basic tools, everything you gain later becomes an advantage instead of a crutch. Using what you have also exposes your real strengths. When you strip away excuses, when you don't hide behind a lack of resources, you start discovering what you're actually capable of. A creator with only a phone learns storytelling. An entrepreneur with no funding learns sales. A person with no network learns resilience and grit. These skills matter far more than fancy equipment or large budgets because they are the things that carry you through challenges. Tools can enhance your work, but they can't replace the discipline and creativity that come from doing more with less. Many people underestimate the advantage of starting small. When you have fewer eyes on you, you have room to experiment without pressure. You can make mistakes quietly, refine your voice, and learn the game before you're playing. At a higher level, starting with limited resources gives you the freedom to adjust and evolve. Waiting for the perfect moment often traps you in stagnation, where ideas grow old and fear grows stronger. Starting with what you have keeps you moving, and movement is what builds confidence. There is also a powerful psychological shift that happens when you use what you already have. You stop seeing limitations and start seeing options. You stop focusing on what's missing and start focusing on what's possible. That mindset change alone can transform your entire path, because once you train your brain to operate from a place of action instead of scarcity, you stop making excuses for why you can't and start finding reasons for why you must. You stop feeling behind and start building forward. Every tool you need to begin is already in your hands. Your time, your effort, your creativity, your willingness to start small and grow. Most people never begin because they are trapped in the noise of what everyone else thinks. Opinions from friends, family, coworkers, strangers, online voices that don't live your life, don't carry your responsibilities, and won't face your consequences end up having more influence over your decisions than your own intent. The moment you let outside opinions dictate your direction, you lose ownership of your story. You can't build something meaningful while constantly adjusting yourself to satisfy people who aren't even paying attention to your long-term happiness. When you focus on intent instead of approval, you start operating from a place of clarity instead of insecurity. Intent is your internal compass. It's the reason you want to start, the purpose behind your effort, the deeper why driving every step. When you anchor yourself to that, judgment becomes background noise. People who don't understand your journey will always have something to say. They'll question your choices, laugh at your early attempts, or doubt your potential because it's easier for them to critique than to create. But their opinions don't change your reality. They don't change your potential. They don't change your mission. Their noise only matters if you let it interrupt your momentum. Most people who judge you are projecting their own fears. They're uncomfortable seeing someone chase something they never had the courage to pursue. They'll try to talk you out of your dreams because your ambition highlights their hesitation. When you understand that, their words lose their power. You stop taking criticism personally and start seeing it for what it is, a reflection of them, not you. Focusing on intent means remembering why you started even when others don't see the vision yet. Your intent doesn't need to be understood by everyone. It just needs to be strong enough for you to stay consistent. When you focus on opinions, you end up playing defense, hesitating, editing yourself, watering down your ideas to avoid backlash. That kills creativity. It kills authenticity. It kills momentum. But when you focus on intent, you start playing offense. You take risks. You test ideas. You move fast. Because you're guided by purpose, not permission. You become more resilient because setbacks don't shatter your self-worth. They simply redirect your approach. You become more confident because you're aligned with something internal rather than chasing validation from people who aren't living your life. Intent also protects your energy. It filters your decisions. When you're clear on what you're trying to build, you can separate useful feedback from empty criticism. You can tell who's offering insight and who's projecting insecurity. You can choose which voices matter and which voices are irrelevant. You start spending less time explaining yourself and more time executing. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable and start expanding because you finally understand your own direction. If you spend your life trying to avoid judgment, you'll end up avoiding growth. You'll play small to stay safe. You'll trade your potential for approval. But when you commit to your intent, you give yourself permission to move boldly, even when others don't understand. You're not here to live someone else's script. You're here to build something that aligns with your own purpose, no matter who doubts it along the way. Most people wait for perfect timing, perfect conditions, perfect confidence, or perfect clarity before they begin anything meaningful. But perfection is a myth that keeps you stuck in planning mode instead of doing mode. Imperfect action is the only way anything real ever gets built. Every successful entrepreneur, creator, or leader you admire started with something messy, unpolished, and incomplete. They didn't wait to feel ready. They started, learned in real time, adjusted on the fly, and grew through the process. The idea that you need everything figured out before you move is just fear pretending to be strategy. Imperfect action forces you to confront the real world instead of your imagination. When you actually do something, launch the project, post the content, send the pitch, try the idea, you get feedback you could never get by thinking about it. You see what works and what doesn't. You notice where your strengths are and where you need to improve. You begin to understand your audience, your market, your craft. None of this happens when you're stuck in planning or daydreaming. Execution reveals next step. Every action creates clarity, while overthinking only creates more questions. The reason imperfect action matters so much is because it builds momentum. Momentum is everything. One step leads to the next step. One small win creates confidence. One piece of progress makes you believe the next piece is possible. Without momentum, ideas die in your head, but once you build it, entire journey becomes easier because you're no longer trying to force yourself to start. You're simply continuing what you've already begun. Momentum makes discipline feel natural, and it transforms small efforts into big outcomes over time. People resist imperfect action because they're afraid to be seen starting small. They worry they'll look inexperienced, unpolished, or amateur. But the irony is that nobody remembers your early work except you, and even if they do, those early attempts often inspire people more than the polished result. People relate to authenticity. They respect those who show the courage to begin without pretending to be something they're not. The only people who judge beginners are the ones who never started anything themselves. Anyone who has ever built something understands that messy beginnings are part of the game. There's also a hidden advantage to imperfection, flexibility. When you start small and imperfect, you're free to experiment, change direction, iterate, and evolve without the weight of expectations. If you wait until something is perfect, you'll be too emotionally attached to the outcome to adjust when reality hits. Imperfect action keeps you adaptable. It allows you to learn from mistakes instead of fearing them. It trains you to make decisions and adapt quickly, which is one of the most valuable skills in any pursuit. Every breakthrough you're chasing will come from doing, not thinking. Imperfect action is uncomfortable, but it's always the path forward. It shifts you from hesitation to execution, from potential to progress, from dreaming to building. Patience isn't just about waiting. It's about understanding the long-term nature of growth and building the emotional stamina required to stay consistent when results are slow. Most people underestimate how long things actually take. They romanticize success as if it happens in a sudden burst, a lucky break, or a viral moment. But real progress is a marathon of small, repetitive, often boring actions that compound over time. Without patience, you quit right before the momentum kicks in. You abandon your path because you mistake slow progress. No progress, but patience gives you the mental space to let your work breathe, to let your ideas develop, and to let your skills catch up to your ambition. Building patience is like training a muscle. It grows through deliberate, uncomfortable practice. You learn to stay committed even when the results are invisible. You learn to trust the process even when nothing seems to be happening. You learn to choose consistency over impulsiveness. This is where most people fall apart. They want immediate validation, instant growth, fast results. And when those don't show up in the first week or the first month, they convince themselves the effort isn't worth it. But the people who win are the ones who stay through the part where nothing seems to be working, because they understand that this phase is not failure, it's foundation. Patience doesn't mean moving slowly or lacking urgency. It means you show up with intensity while understanding that outcomes take time. You put in the work today knowing it may take months or years before you see the true impact. That mindset protects you from burnout because you're not constantly measuring your worth against short-term metrics. You are measuring your effort, your discipline, your consistency. You're investing in the long game, and the long game always rewards those who stay the course. One of the biggest challenges in developing patience is comparison. Social media makes it look like everyone is winning faster than you. You see highlight reels of overnight success, big announcements, and polished achievements. What you don't see is the years of failure, obscurity, doubt, and struggle that happened behind the scenes. When you compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, impatience becomes inevitable. You start rushing, forcing outcomes, or abandoning your own timeline because it doesn't match theirs. Patience brings you back to your own lane. It reminds you that meaningful growth cannot be rushed, and that your journey has its own pace. Patience also sharpens your decision-making. When you're not desperate for immediate results, you make choices that serve your long-term vision rather than your short-term emotions. You resist shortcuts, you avoid distractions, you stop jumping from idea to idea looking for the fastest payoff. Patience gives you clarity, and clarity gives you power. You no longer chase momentum, you build it. You no longer hope for luck, you create opportunity through persistent effort. The truth is, everything worthwhile takes longer than you expect. Skill takes time. Confidence takes time. Trust takes time. Mastery takes time. Patience allows you to embrace that reality instead of fighting it. When you treat patience like a muscle and train it through consistent action, you become unstoppable because you're no longer dependent on immediate gratification to keep going. Consistency is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter where you start, how much talent you have, or how many resources are in your corner. If you show up every day with discipline and repetition, you will outperform people who rely solely on natural ability. Talent gives you a head start, but consistency determines the finish line. Most people with talent never reach their full potential because they depend on what they were born with instead of building habits that move them forward. Meanwhile, the person who keeps showing up, keeps improving, keeps practicing, keeps pushing, they stack micro wins that eventually turn into mastery. Consistency isn't glamorous, it's not loud, exciting, or instantly rewarding. It's built in the quiet moments when nobody is watching. It's the early mornings, the late nights, the boring repetitions, the uncelebrated effort. This is why so many people struggle with it. They want the thrill of progress without the persistence required to earn it. They want breakthroughs without the groundwork. But consistency is about honoring the process even when the results are invisible. It's about developing the internal discipline to do what matters, especially on the days when motivation disappears. People often confuse motivation with momentum. Motivation is emotional. It comes and goes depending on your mood. Momentum is built through consistent action, regardless of how you feel. When you commit to consistency, you free yourself from relying on motivation. You stop negotiating with yourself. You learn to move even when it's inconvenient, even when you're tired, even when it's difficult. Over time, this builds a level of mental toughness that talent alone cannot compete with. Discipline becomes your advantage. Habits become your fuel. Consistency also compounds. Every small effort stacks on top of the last one. A single day of work might feel insignificant, but one day becomes 7, 7 becomes 30, 30 becomes a year, and suddenly you've built something substantial. You didn't leap forward, accumulated progress through thousands of tiny decisions. That's what most people overlook. They underestimate the power of small steps done repeatedly. They mistakenly believe that progress requires massive action when in reality it requires steady action. Another overlooked aspect of consistency is that it creates identity. When you show up day after day, you stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who does. You build confidence because you have evidence of your commitment. You trust yourself because you've proven through action that you keep your promises. This identity shift is powerful. It anchors you. It stabilizes you. It transforms consistency from something you force into something that feels natural, almost automatic. When you practice consistency, you also become immune to temporary setbacks. A bad day doesn't derail you because it's just one moment in a long chain of effort. A slow month doesn't break you because you know progress returns as long as you stay in motion. Consistency creates resilience. It teaches you that success isn't measured by intensity. It's measured by durability. The goal is not to go hard for a week. The goal is to show up for years. That's how long-term wins are built. Talent may spark the idea, but consistency is what completes the journey.